and I will open the chat. So. All right, I'm going to leave you to it.
All righty. Oh, there we go. There we go. Just waiting for folks to pile in. Hope everyone's enjoying the conference so far. I've loved all the speakers we've had, so that's been great. All righty, I am gonna get started here. Let me know, make sure everybody can see my slideshow. All righty. Well, I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Francisco Valenzuela. Everybody calls me Fran, and I have been living the FIFO lifestyle now since 2010. So FIFO stands for fly in, fly out. So basically is, we fly into work. So we fly into work, we work our rotation. Some rotations could be 2 weeks in, 2 weeks out, 2 weeks in, 1 week out. There's lots. There's 28, 28. It all just depends where you're at and the kind of work. It's very prevalent in the oil and gas sector, and that's a part of the industry I'm in. So, for example, there's 50,000 FIFO workers employed in the Alberta oil sands. So that's an old stat from 2014. And one of the findings from this type of lifestyle is we're at higher incidence of stress, depression, anxiety, and suicide. And I'll share a stat from the United States later on in this presentation. But some of the things, and I'll speak from my lived experience, is struggle with isolation, particularly during the pandemic. The pandemic was something that really impacted all of us that live this lifestyle. Disconnect with our families, our partners, our friends, and that's a big one. Guilt and shame, and Dr. Harold spoke so well about shame. So I won't go into depth because he did that for us already, but I know that I suffered and struggled with a lot of shame and guilt. Reliance on others. That's a tough one. Relying on other people to do the things that you feel are your role when you're away from home with your family. That is something that is very hard to deal with, and missing out on important events. So birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, missed a lot of Christmases, a lot of birthdays. So it's tough. So I'll talk a little bit about my journey. So when I started and I got up north and I was working for one of the oil majors, north of Fort Mac at one of the oil sands, and this was during construction. I remember being up there and saying, wow, I finally made it to big oil. I'm finally big oil. And I had this old grizzled veteran. He actually corrected me and he said, kid, you ain't big oil yet. And I asked him, well, what do you mean? And he said, kid, you're not big oil until you got a divorce or two under your belt. Well, I can officially now say that I am big oil. I've been married twice, divorced twice. I carry a lot of shame. With both. First marriage, I was very much believing in terms of I've got to build this career, this empire, and I will have time later. And one of the things I've learned in my journey is you actually never have time later. You can only make time, and you make time for what you feel is important, what your priorities are. And at that time, it was career and making money so that I could provide for my family, right? The old adage of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that first marriage died of neglect, I feel, and I have to own that part of it. Second marriage, I wanted to correct that. So I was very dedicated to family. But then pandemic hit, and then my rotations ended up being longer. So then had those disconnects. And, once you have that disconnection with your loved ones, with your family, and then you feel, isolated even at home, it makes things really hard and things fall apart. So that's kind of the long and short of it. So as I was going through those divorces, and my talk will be primarily about resistance to asking for help. So I don't know how many of you are like me, but I'm that generation that, you had the VCR, if you remember those, and it was blinking 12 o'clock. And I remember my VCR blinked 12 o'clock until DVDs came out, and then streaming. And then now I don't have to worry about it because the problem solved itself. But I never ever corrected the blinky VCR. So as part of this lifestyle is we do a lot of masking and some maladaptive behaviors, how we numb. So again, I struggled with the shame of, wait a minute, I had 2 marriages that failed. I failed as a husband. I failed as a father. My kids, they had everything they could ever want. Lego sets, TVs in their rooms, computers, games, anything they wanted, they had. And I remember talking with my son. He's 23, but I remember talking to him when he was probably about 17, and he said to me, Dad, I didn't want things, I just wanted your time. Broke my heart. So that's one of those I still feel it. But I'm very proud that we can have those conversations. And actually express those emotions. So, like this one slide speaks, things that I was masking is fear. One of the things I couldn't ask for help, I felt I couldn't ask for help, was what if my family knows that I'm afraid, right? I was the breadwinner of the family. So, oh, then they'll think I'm not competent or I can't handle this. And then they'll start to worry. And I didn't want them to worry, right? Worry, anxiety, depression. Though I was never ever diagnosed with depression. I know during these divorces it was very difficult for me. And I never went out and asked for help. I'm great at telling people to go ask for help. I'm actually really shitty at asking for help myself. Some of it is part of the shame that Dr. Harold spoke about is I didn't feel I deserved help because I kind of put myself into this, right? Marriage breakdown, huge one for me twice. Thought I'd get it right the second time. It didn't work out, but you can only own what's yours. So that's something I've learned through my healing process. In a way, my second time around, I learned how to be a better father through parenting stepkids. So I am grateful for that. So that was something that I learned how to be more attentive and be present. One of the challenges of this lifestyle is you get caught up in, we'll call it the golden handcuffs. When you live this lifestyle, you'll find that, some of the benefits, and I'll share a little bit later, is an above average income. But I remember another kind of veteran of this lifestyle said to me, he says, it pays well, but it costs more. And I didn't quite understand it at the time. And, that's one of those things, right? Like, you live life forwards, but you understand it kind of backwards, is you need that experience. Um, so that was one of those tough things that I had to learn. Um, like I look at these numbing behaviors, retail therapy, that was a huge one, right? Put myself into a lot of debt that I needed to keep working the way I worked and even work more. So look for extra shifts because I would look at things, and ego too plays into it. It's like, oh, I want to provide really, really well for the family. We had the big campers, we had the big house, we had all the toys, all the knickknacks, but oh, you have to make so much money to keep it, to maintain it. And then if you start to sell it, then you have the shame of like, oh, wait a minute, what's going on? There's a fire sale. And then the people around you kind of, oh, wait a minute, what's going on, right? You pull away, and I've been guilty of that. A lot of risk-taking behavior, and that generally happened for me when I went through my divorces. Some folks, it's violence. I'm grateful that never happened for me. And then I guess during my single periods in between my marriages, after my marriages, pretty superficial relationships. Sex was a numbing behavior. Video games, anything that would numb the pain, that would take up that time. So just share kind of what happened in a way. So my experience, why, and I never asked for help. And that was something that I wish I would have done. Because knowing what I know now, it would have really helped me. So after my first marriage, I wasn't sure, because I was the breadwinner. I wasn't sure about the financial situation. So decided to separate December 1st, 2017. So I just took clothes and my things and left the house. But I couldn't leave my family without a place to live. So I just lived in my Toyota Tundra, and I parked it outside the campground in Medicine Hat. The campground was closed, but I could still get Wi-Fi. So I was having a lot of trouble sleeping. So I think I did get to the end of Netflix that year. So from January to July 6th, on my days off, I'd fly home, and then I'd just park at that outside in the parking lot of that campground. So I had a lot of shame, and I felt that's the life I deserved. And I had a lot of suicidal ideation. I struggled a lot because I didn't see my kids. I had no place to to really take them. So it became more like, once in a while go for supper with them. But for that time from January to July, it was very difficult, particularly the winter, because I'd turn on the truck, let it warm up, and then turn it off to save on gas. Yeah, so that was a struggle. Like I said, definitely thought about suicide, attempted it a couple times, and talk about shame, I couldn't even do that right. And I couldn't share with my parents because that December, on the 21st, my sister passed away from cancer. So my parents were dealing with that, and I didn't want to put anything else on them. So I only had two friends that knew that I was going through a divorce, and I kept telling them, yeah, I'm good, I'm okay. And that's what I did. And I didn't share, and I didn't reach out to anybody, and it was very lonely, it was very difficult. But kind of got through that. Second marriage was a little bit different. I struggled a lot with feeling a part of the family after being gone for a while and being included into the family routine. So when that happened, when that one kind of failed or fell apart, I left the house right away. I didn't have a place to live, just had my pickup and lived in that for a while. And then I did do a little bit better. I went and bought myself a little trailer, and I lived in campgrounds, proper campgrounds, versus just inside in the cab of a pickup truck. And did that till I got a place, and that happened June of 22. So that's quite fresh for me. And yeah, it was that one was difficult. I felt like we were like in this slide, right? Islands apart. We were married, but the disconnect is huge, and we seek connection as human beings, as people. And yeah, I just didn't have that. I had the high pressure of providing, not just for my first family, because I had financial responsibilities with them, but then my second wife, she'd started a company, so I was supporting that house while she started the company and wasn't bringing in an income. So I had financial stress where I'd have to take care of both. So I had a lot of pressure. And then even in the divorce, what happened to me is when I received the letter from the lawyer seeing what was being asked of me, for in terms of spousal support, it floored me, because it would have left me with less money than I made. So I was like, I can't afford to eat, I can't afford to live. This is all I'm worth. So I remember very distinctly receiving that letter. And I live in Medicine Hat, and there's a prominent bridge called Finley Bridge, and I'm a climber. So I took one of my climbing ropes. I went to the bridge. I tied one end to the bridge. I tied the other end to myself, and I sat on the edge of that bridge. And yeah, and felt desperate, embarrassed, tons of shame. Harold's presentation really resonated for me. So I sat there, and I was ready to end my pain. And one of the things that I've learned is, when you make a decision like that, and you don't get rid of any pain, you just transfer it to the people you live with. And I remember a voice came to me, shared a couple things while I was on the bridge, and said, and for me, and the voice spoke and said, don't let her deny you your kids, and don't let this deny your kids their father. And then again, I untied my ropes and cried all the way walking back to my apartment that I'd rented for the time being, and then realized, okay, I've got to get through this. I still didn't reach out for help. I very much struggle with asking for help. And I'm glad that I had the work that I had, because I did have colleagues at work, and they did know that I was getting divorced that time. But again, many times I always said, I'm okay, I got this, I'm good. And I try and be, I'm generally the funny guy at work, kind of the comic relief. The work is good. It does have its challenges. So in a nutshell, I started to rebuild my life and myself after that moment. Decided to, okay, I've got to fight to keep an income to survive and be able to eventually thrive, right? And getting there. And I think anybody that's been through divorce, we struggle with feelings of failure, guilt, shame. Oh my goodness, that was a great talk by Harold. Really, like I said, really resonated. But very grateful for groups like Connected Men, and like I know Mike was a great source. If I asked for help from anybody first, it was definitely Mike, and his Connected Men group. So that's kind of where seeking help started for me. And I'm very grateful for that. So you'd think, my goodness, Fran, you've got, this FIFO life sounds terrible. Why are you doing it with all this? Well, it's actually a very exciting life. It can be, if you can, if you go into it with your eyes wide open, which there is no mentorship to go into this until you get there, and then you start talking to people, right? So like this slide speaks to it, right? Yeah, above average income potential, a lot of career growth. It is very unique, challenging work, and it can take you all over the world. I myself have worked in Chile. I've worked up north, up in the Northwest Territories even. Yeah, a lot of opportunity. The nice thing is as much as I dread the days at work, the days off are fantastic. I get 2 weeks off at a time. Most people work a whole year to get 2 weeks off at a time. I get that every month. Learning how to manage that within the family groups is tough, because their lives don't stop for 2 weeks. So that's a challenge, right? The people, we often joke around in FIFO life that we have two families. We have our work family, and then we have our home family. And in a way, it's reconciling both, because you miss both. And that's the incredible thing about it, is you do miss both, and they both fill your buckets in different ways. There's a huge sense of adventure to the work. You get to travel. You feel a little bit like a rock star, I'm not going to lie. And you build these strong bonds with those coworkers. Most of my closest friends tend to be the people I work with versus the people in my community, because I spend less time in my community. So yeah. So what are some of the challenges? Well, the biggest one, and there have been studies coming out of Australia. There was one done specifically from the U of A on the Alberta oil sands. So time and distance away from family and friends, and that disconnect is very real. I find, going into new relationships, is that connection piece is so important. Knowing what you are feeling as an individual is important, that you're able to share with your partner or your support network. You have to be able to share the bouquets and like the crappy stuff, so you have that connection. Set up times to talk with one another, right? But that emotional and mental disconnect can be very real, and in a way, it's a big it's a harbinger of doom of relationships. Once you have that that disconnect set in, then you have resentment. You feel like, oh, wait a minute, I'm making these sacrifices. And then if you feel that there are commensurate sacrifices on the other end, or you're needing affection and it's not reciprocated, but there's expectations of provision, then you start resenting one another. Parenting's tough, with my children. I miss them growing up. I miss those very important moments in their lives, like when they start walking, or you'll miss a ton of birthdays, tons of birthdays, Christmases, Easters. You don't get to hide eggs with them or go find them, and yeah, it's tough. Fear of missing out, and you have high work performance demands, so that makes it tough. And then your financial stressors, like I said, you get into financial issues. So what were some of the things that my resistance to asking for help? A lot of that suck it up, buttercup. And there's another FIFO in FIFO where it's like fit in or fuck off. Sorry to use that kind of language, but that's the language. And so you don't want to look weak, right? So I had looked at resilience, and resilience is a double-edged sword. And if you depend too much on yourself, you actually don't get to, you don't get to ask for help. You won't ask for help. So in here, I felt I had all these except for and I wouldn't ask for social support. And I didn't have the emotional awareness either. And I definitely didn't want to look weak. But I did learn something from a friend. And I remember we hadn't connected in about 15 years. And then out of the blue, I got a phone call near Christmas time, late November, early December. And it was, I need to talk. I don't know who to talk to, and I need help. And the courage it took him to reach out to me really touched me and taught me so much, that because he reached out for help, and he was going through a divorce as well, just starting a divorce. And he went to the guy, I guess, that he felt maybe had a little bit more experience in it than him. So, but I'm grateful that he taught me that. So one of the things I'm very proud of, for instance, my company has done, is they've brought in a counselor for regular rotations to provide counseling at no charge to our work community. And this reduces barriers to seeking help, as men, we're terrible for asking help. One of the interesting stats is we've had over 200 people as first-time users of a mental health service. And that is incredible. Teaching our folks how to ask for help is very important. And not all companies provide this level of on-site services. So that's something I'd like to change. And that way, and anybody that wants to help, this is my call for action, is to change the regulation to include mental health supports on site for remote community or remote work, so that our folks do have these services available, and for companies to help enhance their mental health resources and benefits for employees. So kind of working, my mission is to create an environment for the FIFO lifestyle that I would feel proud to have my son enter it with eyes wide open and the resources available to help him thrive. So that's actually very powerful for me. And one last little stat about the mental health in our industry, and these are stats out of the United States through the CDC, is that we actually have in the mining sector is 72 per 100,000. And in the construction oil gas extraction sector, it's 65 in males per 100,000, and females, it's 25.3 per 100,000. So when you look at it in the general civilian population, it's 31 per 100,000 for males. So we're more than double in men, and in females, we're like, 3 times more in that. So that's why for me, it's very important to have these resources available for my work community and for my son when he enters it.
Nice. Thank
And
you.
that's about it. That's all I got, folks.
Man, I tell you, we're not even giving people time to pee between sessions tonight. This is jam-packed, Fran. Thank you so much. You've got a website,
Yes.
FIFO4real.ca.
Yeah. So that's what it is. I started that. That's my pain to purpose,
I totally know. Fran, thank you so much for sharing your story. Lots of resonance in the comments. I know you're making a difference, brother, and I am so proud to see you speaking your truth and sharing your voice to the conversation. Friends, we are back to back to back to back to back to back to back and still going strong. So I will invite you now to hop on over and join into Dan Sundall's presentation. We'll see you next door, so to speak, and hang around at the end. So once Dan is done, we do have Alexander McMullen, half of Genesia, is going to come perform for us before we wrap up for the night. So grab your favorite evening beverage and tune in for our last session together. And I'll see you over at the next webinar. Take care. Thanks again, Fran.
Thanks. See you.